I'd like to thank the audience for joining our webinar today on SAP data integration and getting your critical SAP data into your cloud data lake. I'm Miranda Burke, and I'm the Senior Marketing Manager here at SAP, and I'll be your host for today. Today's 30-minute webcast is being recorded, and all registrants will be sent the link to the recording and the presentation at the end. Questions can be asked at any time via the chat function on the side of your screen, and we'll answer them throughout the presentation. And as you know, you have the flexibility to adjust the presentation screen. You can find that expand button right in the middle of your screen below the speaker boxes. All right, now introducing my esteemed colleagues, starting out with Ben Deaver, who is based in Dallas, and he is our Senior Solution Architect Leader here in North America. Ben, if you want to come on camera.
Hey, good morning.
All right. And with us today, if you want to just flip to that next screen here, we have Mattia Motolini, who is our expert product manager who's based in Europe, and we are lucky to have him on the webinar today. So with that, the floor is yours, gentlemen.
Thank you, Miranda. So hello, everybody. What we want to do today is to talk a bit about our experience in data integration projects, what we see at the customers, some consideration about when customers approach these projects, because more often than not, they prove to be quite complicated. So this is our goal for the day. Yeah, and if you, Ben, want to move to the next slide, we can just start. So first of all, just a couple of words on why we all do all of this, which is data-driven companies. That's the ultimate goal that companies are trying to achieve. And that's because data, it's a key asset for companies nowadays, as is essential to drive decisions, strategy, and operations. If we think about companies like Netflix, Amazon, or Spotify, these are all companies that made of their capability of leverage the information and data a key asset for their growth. But of course, information to feed to the customers is not the only area where data can help in organization. And if you can go to the next slide, we can see how data can support the enterprise across a multitude of areas, and it's really important. It's fundamental today. Why it is so is because ultimately it helps understanding your customers, understanding the market, the competition, to improve the performance and to find new opportunities. So ultimately, you can make better decisions that are based on evidence and not on guesswork. And that helps you to increase your revenue, discover new opportunity, and a lot of very, very, very nice things. So how do we enable that? And that's the challenge. And for that, we want to go a bit on the technical side and discuss some aspects that are necessary to enable these scenarios. Of course, the most important thing is to create a data culture, and this means that companies need to invest in data, data team, technology, and analytics. If you want to go to the next slide, first of all, talking about technology, cloud and cloud-based data platforms is the big thing nowadays. Back when we started with data integration, we were working with technologies like Hadoop, for example, and they were very disruptive back then because they brought a lot of innovation. All of a sudden, customer could store huge amount of data that from multiple sources, and they were starting to move the first steps in this direction. But we really saw in a really extreme increase in adoption when cloud-based data platform came on the market. And in the last few years, it just blew up. And why is that? Because they bring really a lot of advantages compared with the legacy or previous on-prem technologies and technologies. And of course, one of the main one is how cost-effective they are for many reasons. It's very easy to scale up and reduce the utilization of this platform according to your use case and scenario. What they do, they bring technologies that before required a lot of complexity. They required a team, they required hardware. They now are able to bring these technologies to the customers without all these blockers in a very simple way. And of course, on this platform, all new technologies are available, and this ultimately brings to better insights. Collaboration is something that this platform are naturally good at, as you are working with data that is online and easily shareable. The appeal and the somehow sexiness of these technologies can definitely improve the engagement. People are excited to work with this technology. And also this technology are very reliable, so continuity is guaranteed. So now sounds very easy and lean, but is it really like that? Well, only partially. And if we go to the next slide, we can understand why. Here we can see how complex still is to enable a data platform and enable data practices. This is just a generic example of a data infrastructure. It's just a reference architecture, but you can see how many moving parts and how many components are required to deliver those insights that we just talked about a few slides before. You need to collect data from multiple sources, you need to ingest them, you need to store them, and all these technologies are different. They're all powerful, but you really need to be careful on what you choose according to your use case and what's best for your companies. And then you need to work with this data and being able to prepare the data for consumption and eventually analysis and display. So what we do in S&P, we can help the customer in several areas. You can see now some of them are highlighted in this diagram. Our primary focus is to help the customer to gather SAP data to these data cloud platforms. So you can see that with Glue, we can move the data back and forth from this cloud platform, but we can also support the customer to work with the data on this platform. And also we have a department that can support with data modeling and dashboarding and deliver the final result to the end customers. But let's now focus on the ingestion part, because we are here to talk about data integration projects. And as we move to the next slide, let's look into some of the consideration that we need to pay attention to when we approach a data integration project. So first of all, the scenario. It's of course very important and somehow obvious. So we need to clearly define the type of data we want to ingest, where is the source of the data, because that will also have impact on our choices, the format of the data from the source and how we want to transform it to the target, the volume of data that can have a huge impact on the tool and product we choose, and how all of these will be integrated. The scenario will determine our architecture, of course. So choice of if we want to go for some product that can support our integration, the platform, the patterns we want to follow, and techniques, in general, the generic architecture that we want to implement. The next point is, I don't see the next point yet, are the deliverables. So really identify what are the use cases, what we are trying to achieve. So objective, requirements, and the expectation that will be met. And in the next point, we want to also be careful about what are the challenges for this project, what are the costs and benefits that projects will bring us. So a generic assessment of the project. And finally, once all of this in place, it's important not to forget operational checklist, because of course the project doesn't end with the go live or the data in production. All sorts of governance, security, compliance, all these best practice that guarantee the data to keep coming into the cloud and be up to date and reflect the state of our enterprise in terms of data. There is a whole set of operation and best practice, and this is also reflected when you choose a product or a tool. Make sure that this product can support you in this direction as well. And now we want to focus a bit more on SAP data, because that's our specialty. And why do we focus on that? That's because, as you can see, data integration is already a complex scenario, but when it comes to SAP, there are some additional challenges. And that's due to the fact that there is a big technology and knowledge gap between the SAP world and the data platform and the data world. In terms of technology, these are very different technology. One is a cloud technology, very modern. SAP is somehow more slow pace. A lot of customers are still on premise, or they are on a private cloud, but still the system of SAP is of course has its own specific and complex patterns and scenario that somehow are not so intuitive, and for somebody that comes from some different area of expertise. And here it comes also the knowledge gap. Many data platform specialists, when it comes to SAP data, they struggle. They don't know how to extract it. They don't know the complexity of the SAP data model. And even when they move the data on the platform, then they struggle making sense of that data. So that's why we focused as SAP expert first. We tackled this challenge, and we specialized in integrating SAP data. So as we will see later on, we of course with SNP Glue we have a product for data integration. But in general, what are the characteristics that we see customers are looking at when they are deciding for a data integration product? So if we go to the next slide, we can see a summary of that. We have three areas here. First of all are the functional requirements. Those are somehow very clear. What your tool can do. So customer is very important for customer to make sure that the tool they are purchasing is capable of covering all the functionalities they need. For example, near real-time or real-time data replication, they need CDC management, what level of integration they need with SAP, do they need BW integration, do they need to integrate at table level or for example, ODP, for who's familiar with SAP, there are multiple layers that we can tap and interfaces that we can tap into when we replicate data. So make sure that your product that you will choose is capable of covering the scenarios that you need. Be careful about licensing, often tricky with SAP. Can you connect directly at database level? is your product license compliant from that in that sense? And of course, how does it deploy, and how do you monitor the replications? These are pretty clear, but on top of that, it's important to make sure that the tool is reliable and efficient, because many products have on paper, they are capable and they have all the features you need, but you have to really make sure that this product, the product you choose, is enterprise ready, so it can deliver in a production environment and possibly at scale the feature that it advertised. So we're talking about things like mass processing, automation. Are the features mature enough? What about recovery and restart if something goes wrong? Is it easy? How much of time does it take to your team to recover from a failure? All these things are very important, and often it's not easy to understand because it's not a feature, it's not a name. You really need to try the product and make sure that it fulfills your requirement. And eventually, all of this leads to cost saving. A tool that can help you with a light impact on your infrastructure, that is easy to understand, operate, and quick to operate, can lower your operational costs. A tool that is compatible with the cloud platform where you're sending the data and optimized can help you reducing your computational cost on the cloud and the resource consumption. So all of these are key consideration that the customers need to look at when they are choosing a product for data integration. So now we want to go a bit more into details of what are some of the challenges when it comes to data integration. And these are, all this information comes from our own experience on field. So with customer, the POC and projects we run, we collected all this information, and this is what we are reporting to you today. And we have Ben here in the call with us, and yeah, you, Ben, you're working with customer daily, and they're very familiar with some of these challenges, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Mattia. But yeah, in working with our customers on a day-to-day basis and working with multiple projects across the world, there are some typical SAP data integration challenges. And so what I'd like to do is be able to share with the group is some of the learnings that we have accumulated over the past several years, some of the areas where we've seen our customers struggle with their data integration journey, and things that we've done to be able to help reduce that pain for them. And so rather than reading through this entire slide, I'm just going to go ahead and jump directly into the details on some of these. And as we're going through this, again, just reaching out to the audience, if you have any specific questions, feel free to ping them into the chat, and we'll be happy to answer those questions as they do pop up. And so, jumping ahead, let's talk about the first challenge point here, which is a lack of built-in automation. It's relatively simple to integrate a single scenario, one table or view or ODP, or just dump of data from SAP up into your cloud data platform of choice. Yeah, it's a pretty standard pattern, something that you can do. It takes a little bit of effort. Being able to do that 1,000 times suddenly becomes a pretty Herculean effort. And so you've got to be able to automate not just your development activities and be able to massively and quickly roll those activities out, but then you also have to make sure that you're able to automate the integration itself. When you're doing full table loads once per day, maybe that's not such an incredible effort that you can't overcome it until you ramp up to scale. But when you're talking about near real-time data integration, whether that's micro batching every 5 minutes or streaming the data in a near real-time fashion, your tool set has to be able to support that automation and those scaling capabilities. But again, going back to the development perspective, being able to make sure that you've got a tool set that's going to automate as much of the development as possible for you. And that's got to include not just the development inside of the SAP landscape where the data is being shipped and pushed from, but also on your target system. So think about integrating up to Snowflake, for an example. how are you going to automatically resolve any type casting mismatches? There's two different sets of data types and data structures. Are you going to, you want to make sure that you're using a tool that's going to automatically create the target tables inside of Snowflake rather than having somebody manually entering in those create or replace statements on your Snowflake database. Those development activities eat a lot of time, and working with tools like SAP Glue that have that end-to-end built-in automation, not just on the development platform, but then also on the ongoing integration, it's going to reduce your time to value. It's going to reduce your overall sustainment costs, and it's going to allow you to integrate data at scale in, quite honestly, hours or days rather than months or weeks, rather than months that you see with a lot of other tools. I'm going to jump forward. So stability issues. Every customer is going to have concerns around network or system resources. You're always going to have concerns about, hey, is this tool either going to make my system unstable itself, or how do we deal with other, stability issues that do come into play? And the way that we resolve that is by building the most resilient solution that we can. Stability of replication, it's a very common concern. As we get closer to a near real-time mass replication type of scenario, it becomes even more prevalent. The closer you get to real time, historically, the more fragile your replications become. And so you think about this from an architectural challenge perspective, and S&P has come up with some really interesting and really unique solutions. Our solution, which has a small Java component, we've had instances where it's run into, for lack of a better term, a lot of network glitches that were stopping communication. And those daily, kind of ongoing network glitches can cause us to have ongoing integration issues. By looking at the way that we were deploying our Java processes and having multiple Java processes deployed across multiple different application servers, or even separate VMs if we want to, we have an ability to build in a multiple tier of redundancy that allows us to overcome those types of network instability issues that can impact any platform or any process. And we've gotten to the point where we've rolled this out as a standard development option. So it's now possible to be able to have multiple layers of redundancy, a sort of pseudo high availability for your integration pathways. So we've learned with our larger and higher volume data customers that it's possible to load balance your integration through those multiple processes. It's possible to have automated failover between those Java processes if the network is causing some level of instability. And then beyond that, integrating a really robust error handling process that allows you to still be able to gracefully recover if there's ever a scenario where network connectivity falls off. I'll give one example from a customer that I've worked with for over a year now, and they're based in Azure and up in Canada's central region. If anybody remembers, Canada's central Azure region had a massive outage. I think it was right around Valentine's Day, and SNP Glue was able to, nothing was able to connect to it. It was a total network failure, and so Glue couldn't magically find a way through that path. But what it did was it allowed for everything to very gracefully recover the moment those network connections were put back in place. It did so automatically. So the data integration team, they were actually the first to know that Azure was back up, because Glue, just as soon as that pathway was open, it repaired the connection, sent all of the deltas that had been accumulating up to the data targets, completed that integration, checked the data to make sure everything was connect, turned all the stoplights green, and just carried forward as though nothing had happened. And so it's that very robust error handling, that very flexible capability of trying to avoid failure, but then when there is something that can't be overcome, making sure that it's easy to recover as soon as all the infrastructure is repaired. Jumping forward, so load performance on large objects. Integrating small data sets is relatively trivial. Now we start talking about the big tables. BSEG is always a fun one. It's very wide, it's very dense with data, and it's got a ton of rows in it. And so SNP Glue is going to allow you to look at two methods for overcoming that data volume crunch. One is to scale out horizontally. Okay, so let's break it into bite-sized chunks of data that we can handle within our, whether it be memory or network throughput constraints. And then second is going to be a vertical resolution to the solution. We're going to massively parallelize this load. And so we're going to take those bite-sized chunks of BSEG, and then we're going to split it into multiple threads that are coming out of the SAP server so that we can move as much data as effectively as possible. And Glue's going to keep track of where all of those cursors are in the data set to make sure that number one, you get all the data moved. And number two, we're going to keep track of where we're at with each part of the process. See, recovery after unplanned outages, I kind of jumped ahead to that when I was telling my story about the Canadian outage. Glue is going to find ways to be able to avoid an outage as much as it is capable of doing so. But if there's an unplanned outage, Glue does not consider integration to be complete until it has been validated as being deposited on the target infrastructure. And so you think about that and you say, okay, because I'm pushing the data, if there is an unplanned outage on either the source or the target, if there's a network outage, something that just stops that integration from taking place, Glue is not going to count that integration as complete and is not going to shift delta pointers for CDC integration until we've gotten feedback from the targets that the integration was completed appropriately. What this means is that we have a very dynamic and very robust recovery model for any data integration that we're doing to your cloud data target of choice. Now, keep in mind, I'm not specifying that there's a specific target that this works upon. We're agnostic to that. It doesn't matter what you're integrating to, that same capability is going to exist because remember, Glue's following that push versus pull architecture, meaning that the system that's pushing the data is also in control of the delta pointers. So we can validate the data has safely arrived before we call it complete. And then finally, as we're talking about the enterprise data landscape, SAP integration in that enterprise data platform, you have a tremendous number of opportunities and a tremendous number of targets that you can push your data to. I know that I'm working very heavily with Snowflake, Google Cloud, and Microsoft on almost a daily basis with multiple different customers. I know that we are pushing a tremendous amount of data across, but there's about 40 different enterprise storage targets that we can work with. Now we start talking about what does this bring to the table for our customers? Well, as Mattia was speaking to earlier, this is that logical evolution for companies to be able to become the data-driven organizations they want to be. The first step is being able to bring your data in that ELT pattern up to your Snowflakes or GCP BigQueries or other, and being able to get the data available and ready for consumption into the predictive, prescriptive, descriptive analytics models to be able to make sure that we can stream events, have workflow integration, a real-time push scenario of data coming out of your SAP system and pushing up to cloud where we're then having event-driven actions that are taking place on secondary platforms. So when we're talking about key benefits of SNP Glue, you have that cloud platform connectivity. You have a highly flexible deployment that's going to bring resilience to your enterprise. You have a diverse set of delta mechanisms, whether it be CDC, ODP, or any other type of delta mechanism that is offered. You have enterprise agility, the ability to push data from any NetWeaver stack in your enterprise to your cloud data target of choice. And then finally, the secure accessibilities. We can go into details about any one of those topics, but what I'll leave it at is that SNP Glue is SAP certified, both on the Rise with S/4HANA editions, as well as your standard SAP NetWeaver certification. So we are a partner of SAP. We integrate directly into the NetWeaver stack. And so we're not reinventing the wheel. We're going to fold directly into your existing SAP authorization models. We're going to follow the exact same connectivity patterns that your basis team is already familiar with. We're going to operate inside of that ecosystem absolutely seamlessly. And the final piece I'll mention is the underlying sustainment burden of a new tool like this is going to be minimal because this is SAP software written by legacy SAP resources for those same SAP resources. People see this software and they adapt to it very quickly because it's what they've been working with. And so I know we're running slightly over time. And so if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'll wish you guys a wonderful day and thank you for attending.